Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, and I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Nicolas Tober. He's the co-founder of Inbox Booster. It's an AI-driven email marketing platform. I suspect that being a founder involves communicating why people should use your product. So I'm sure that Nicolas has some ideas on how to do that well. So let's get to asking some questions. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Nicolas.
Thank you.
So I see from a bit of research I did on you that you studied computer science. What was the motivation to do that?
Getting a job, I would say. So actually, I worked just after high school, and so I'm from France, and in France, when you don't have a degree, are pretty tough for you. So you actually, well, if you have a degree, things are much easier. So it's kind of very bimodal in that sense. So I had no degree, and I just had access to unskilled jobs, even though I had the skills. So I was like, yeah, let's get a degree, and then I'll be fine, which is what I did.
Okay.
And that works.
Yeah, I suspect that is the case in a lot of places. I mean, people get degrees because, well, I want to get a job, and it's a lot more difficult to get one when you don't have one. Although I think at least some companies are moving towards, even in at least in the tech industry, not having a degree. Maybe you went to a boot camp or something like that, and you can still get a job in the tech industry.
So first two things, I was already passionate with computer. I had jobs in that space. It's just that didn't want to pay me well, or it was really, really bad jobs. And and in France, they do use that against you. They're like, okay, you have the skills, but you're lucky to have a job because you don't have the degree. And I'm like, yeah, but you're lucky to pay me half of what they would if I had a degree. And and if you say that, then you're out already. So you don't want to have this type of conversation, and you don't want to be in this type of position. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is uh, degrees. Yeah, degrees. What I found is when you're kind of in a weak position, like you basically don't have a degree, don't have a lot of job prospects. So if you're an AI who has invented new technologies, and this is well known that you're this type of person, then you will have no problem finding a job within 5 years. Doesn't mean that in 10 you might need it. So my advice in this position is you never know what, and this is very contrarian, is you never know what can happen. So if you can have a degree and it's kind of low effort or just not a lot of time, it's always worth doing because it puts you in a more of a position of strength. Because at least from France, because in France, when you have a degree, you can apply to civil servant type of position. You have a lot more options. And the problem is not so much that some companies don't require a degree. It's they never did. The problem is more you'll have more job prospects, which is kind of a different outlook on that. And one third element is in France, college is free. And what I did is I went to night classes, so I could do that with a job. So the opportunity cost was not very high because of that. But it was a lot of work. But that's not like oh, I have to use all my savings or I have to take a 10 years loan to be able to afford college. This was free, so I mean, or almost quasi free. So it didn't really. So the problem was more. Do I want to finish at 10 p.m. Every day for the next 2 to 3 years?
I got you. And when you were speaking, Nicola, I also thought about just the tech space here. I mean, every now and then, or you seem to be hearing a lot about layoffs. So there's a whole glut of people in the market looking for a job, and I suspect the ones who have degrees, they may have a easier time of it than those who don't. We're really we're in an employer market right now, and the employers can be really selective on who they pick, and they probably don't want to have to go through a whole lot of resumes. So if they just remove all the people that don't have degrees, well, that's less resumes to go through.
Yeah, that's basically that's kind of the way I looked at it. Again, having been in both sides of the job market, it's really it just increase your position. Now, if you're so in France it's different, but here if you're over 40, they don't care that much. If you're because you're supposed to be senior to have skills and all that. If you're just starting out, this is important. And if the cost of getting it is low, yeah, I mean you should get it, but it's kind of like it's just common sense. Just because it will increase your prospects, some companies will care more about that, so it's more about that. Now, if you have some skills to demonstrate, and you have some experience and all that, it's a different thing. But um, but that does matter. And people don't talk about that enough, but that does matter. And the more, I would say, the more you're from out of the kind of like the more you're outside of the norm, I would say, the more you're atypical. Like you're not from here. You never worked at one of the large companies and all that. Which, by the way, is my case. It's much having a degree helps. Everybody will say they don't care because they don't, but not having it is something they do care, and it's negative. If that makes sense.
Like I do care, I don't care, but I do. So I mean, also I saw that you've actually founded quite a number of various companies over the years. So what's motivated you to be a founder and work for yourself?
So it's actually having worked for really bad employers. Really, no, there were two things. Is one, having worked for really bad employers. So when I was an employee, I never got promoted. I was kind of always on the verge of being fired and all that. So uh, so first, I wasn't necessarily a very good fit as an employee, but also the management was not very good. Also, to be fair. So it was but my point is just I couldn't find a good spot, and I was like, okay, do I want to be homeless or not? So this kind of was the reasoning. So and then actually it turned out I was good at it, and because and it was not it was a lot of hard work, but it wasn't as difficult as being kind of a good employee and just being told what to do and all that. Because you just needed to demonstrate as an entrepreneur, you demonstrate autonomy, be proactive, and do all those things, which are things in the company I worked at were shunned upon. Like they literally fired you for that. So that's basically why it was a better fit.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I'm sure there are people who are listening or watching our conversation, and they have aspirations to start their own business and not be a corporate employee anymore. What do you think what would they need to have in place for them to be able to leave their jobs and become self-employed?
So it's both harder and easier than it looks, which is not really helpful, I know. The point about that is the way I think you should look at is first be very, very clear on what you want to achieve. Like bringing, creating the new Meta is not the same thing as opening a coffee shop. And there are a lot of things in between. And there is nothing wrong with any of that. What matters is to be clear on your aspirations. So if you want to open a coffee shop and you're raising VC funding, it will not work. And conversely, if you want to open Meta without raising funding, it will be much, much more difficult. Again, nothing's impossible, but you're just creating an obstacle. You're just making it harder for yourself. But the first thing is to get clarity. It's okay to not have clarity, but then you should recognize it and say, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out on the way. But at least knowing that is the first step. Then, because then once you have that, then you can set a goal and then you can actually build a plan. And what I'm seeing a lot out there is people trying to build a business without this clarity. They all kind of go to the default option, which is trying to get VC founded, at least where I am right now, because it's a default road, but it's also the hardest and not necessarily the most, not necessarily the smartest. I'll walk you through an example. For businesses, it's not very, I mean, it's hard but possible to reach $10 million of sale for a software business. It's possible, and if you do that, if you're successful, you do that, you're going to make as the owner, as the entrepreneur, you're going to make a million or two of salary, which means that you're rich. So a lot of people will be like, I don't want to do that. I will actually want to bet again all that money, and so I could, instead of making one or two, I want to make 10 million per year. And you're like, okay, but you don't even know what you're going to do with one, so why would you know what you're going to do with 10? And it's because they haven't looked at what they really wanted. They haven't confronted that truly, and they're making a lot of the wrong decision. And VCs are happy because they're buying the business for not a lot of money, and the entrepreneur will not make a lot in the end because of that type of decision. And also, It also comes from some business. Some businesses are good to make 10 million. It's impossible to make 100. So this is hard to foretell, but you kind of need to know that. And the third thing also is I did the opposite. Like I actually wanted to have a small business, and but it was kind of supposed to be big because the business was calling for it, and I absolutely did not want to have a big business. So I kind of let it small by design, and this created a whole set of problems. I'm not going to do that again now. I'm kind of more listening to what the market wants and what I want, and then if it's not aligned, then I'm working out. So this was kind of really the first thing. And if you think like that, the last thing of that is really to think about your resource. So for instance, if you have a day job, you have two kids, you're probably not going to be able to work 18 hours per day on your business. So you need to work with what you have, not dream of what you might have, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. I mentioned in the intro that you are the co-founder of Inbox Booster. Well, what is Inbox Booster and what prompted you to start it?
So when you're a small business and you're sending emails, it's kind of painful to be in the inbox. And when you're not in the spam, nobody really knows why. I'm assuming you're sending a newsletter, and I'm assuming you probably have had that problem yourself, or
Hmm.
never.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So what happens when you're in spam is you don't know what to do. So we've built a free tool that will tell you why you're in spam. And then if you pay us a little bit of money, then we can actually fix it for you, knowing that only 10% of our actual users are paying, which means that 90% figure it out without paying. Because again, our goal is just to make money when we actually you need to spend time on it, when we need to spend time on it, not when it's very obvious. And a lot of those problems have to be with kind of DNS, so plumbing type of issues, connectivity. And other problems is because of what you've sent in the past. And the third problem is has nothing to do with you. It's just because of some wording that you're going to use. And there is no real good tool for that. So that's why I decided to build one.
All right. That sounds really cool. And it certainly sounds like something that people can use. You know, based on the fact that you founded all these companies, I suspect you may have an interesting answer to this. We'll see, I guess. What's one thing that you experienced that you didn't anticipate before actually starting a business?
So what I didn't anticipate uh, would be actually for the business to be successful. And this is that I've actually worked around all those cases as, okay, how do I mitigate loss and all that? I haven't thought too much about what would happen if it's working out and what's the next step. At the same time, it's a little bit, I still think it was the right call. But that's basically the first thing. Second thing, I didn't realize, so it's really odd because I moved here 2 years ago. When you have a business here, it's like very prestigious and all that. And in France, it's really like when you have like it's really like, oh yeah, can you afford a coffee? And like, yeah, of course, it's just about my my home, so I think I can. So it's kind of my point being is in France they really think you're barely homeless, and here in the US they think you're a billionaire, and of course I'm neither. So. So that's kind of that's kind of what I've seen as being different, and I didn't anticipate the social aspect in that sense to be important. Like I just think I just assume it would be a work, and nobody would have a very strong opinion about it. Well, everybody has, whether good or bad.
That's interesting to hear the difference in perspectives from France and the US on how people see business owners. But yeah, to certainly I could definitely see it here. Like if you especially if you're in the tech space, you're Elon Musk, ain't you? Like not
Yeah, that's exactly that thing.
It's like we'll get there maybe someday. We'll see. You know, when I first started this podcast and YouTube channel, Nicola, it was about the struggles of people in the tech space or just people with technical backgrounds having difficulties giving presentations or public speaking generally. And it started with me, having to give presentations as an engineer and not being all that great at it. But I got a lot better at it over time because I saw the benefit of doing so. So just based on your own life in the work that you do, have you always been good at giving presentations or public speaking? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
So I tried a lot of things to get better. I was terrible at it. And the reason I was terrible is because I wasn't explaining, I was spending time enough to explain concepts. Because I had this kind of imposter syndrome, so I thought they all knew more than me. So like, okay, I need to, so I will, because they all know more, then I'll actually try to say really complicated things. And then I realized that no, I've actually spent a lot of time on this, so they probably don't know and they don't care. So I need to make them interested in it first. And the actual thing that helped a lot was what's actually what we started our conversation with. It was really the actually it was my degree because what I did is when I went, it's like you get credit and you stop and you go full classes, you get credit and you stop and you can start again. So when I sold my business after that, I had a little bit of time, so I completed my master's thesis. Uh, and uh, and that was actually really, really hard because I didn't really had spent time writing more than one page document for marketing. And everything I did before that was really terrible. And after that, it became good because that forced you to kind of look at the white page, to think about, okay, what do I want to say? How do I say it? And it's very formal. But also, in my case, the professor helped. So they were like, yeah, you want to say it more like this or that. So that really helped. So in a way, that's how I learned by actually writing a lot. That's
Huh.
kind of and doing that, but I just didn't realize I was doing it. I just was like, oh, okay, it would help to finish this thing. It's 2 months of like work to write a couple of like maybe 50 pages. I have nothing else to do, so let's do it. So plus what I did started to be old, so I really needed to finish it. Otherwise, I would have to kind of start afresh. So like, yeah, it's the right time, let's do it. But that's kind of what I got out of it, and I didn't realize it maybe until a year after.
Interesting. I think that a lot of people out there are in the same situation that you were in, Nicola, in the sense that they're in a position where they're seen as in a certain way, but they may not even see themselves in that way. So they're thinking, it's just like you said, there's people in the audience that you think know more than you. So to justify you being there, you feel the need to overcomplicate things that don't necessarily need to be complicated. And when you do that, it's well, a big issue with that is that the people in the audience may not know as much as you think they know. So now you've actually made it even more difficult for them to even understand what you're saying. It's so unnecessary and so unfortunate when people think that way or feel that way.
I'll give you one example of that is I know a guy, he's a math professor and he created a startup in France and he went to a conference like he did all the grade school. He was detected as the gifted mathematician and all that, like one of the genius, but he's one of the good ones. And he went to a conference and there were like maybe 15 people listening to a presentation and he actually had no clue what it was about. Then he asked people randomly. You realize that actually nobody knew what was the guy talking about. Uh, and nobody dared to say anything to each other because mathematicians are supposed to be super smart. So not understanding something is the worst thing they can say to somebody else because then they will feel stupid or weak. Uh, so they're not going to say that, and they didn't dare to say, "Oh, I have no clue what it is about. Can you actually explain?" And that is what you'll see if you don't, if you're in this type of environment. So it's actually easier to restart from the start and kind of assume that they don't know. And that helped with the math with the thesis and the or in general is yeah, just have to kind of understand your audience really well. And by understanding your audience, it's really what do they know and do they care? And you're here to give an idea, to transmit something, not to show smart or not. It doesn't matter. This is a consequence of sending the message, and this is not the point. You're here to explain something. So if I want to sell my service, I'm not going to assume you'll know anything about email. Also, the people who knows a lot are not going to be necessarily our customers. So the message I would send is if you do send the newsletter, you need to test that your deliverability and if you need us at some point to sell, it will work, but you need to test that your email is in inbox and you need to use our tool for that. That would be the only message I would try to convey and only one message. And that's kind of one key idea. That's really what I'm trying. That's kind of what works. And you shouldn't care too much about how you look or how people will perceive you because one, you don't really control it that much. so it doesn't matter in a way. Two, it doesn't matter because that's not the point. And three, most people don't think, and even if you're a big stage or anything, most people don't think too much about you. Like even if you go to a stadium show and all that, you'll see people like you'll see the artists playing and all that, but I don't think too much about it. So even if it just doesn't matter in the end.
The entire time we were talking, Nico, I was just like, man, this guy's speaking the truth right now. You're absolutely right. Like, it's so interesting how sometimes we think about ourselves and we think that these people are going to be speaking about us however long after the presentation. It's like, nah, man, they move on to the next thing. You think you're so important that you got to be on my mind this entire time after your presentation? It's like, come on, man, I got other things like I got to worry about.
But people will do remember the message, how you made them feel, and the message. But that's kind of the only thing you can, and you're actually lucky if you're there.
Yeah, 100%. When you're giving a presentation, do you ever get nervous beforehand? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
So I'm really good at blocking everything. So I don't really get nervous, and when I do, I'm not handling it very well. So I'm trying to not get nervous
Okay, that's cool.
with this kind of thing, saying, yeah, it doesn't really matter all that much, and I'll just do the best, and that's it.
Oh, that's a good. That's a
That's kind of
yeah. I think that's a good mentality to have. I mean, just we go out there, we do the best we can, and we'll do better next time. Because it's always going to be a next time. Practice makes progress. After all, yeah, I like that.
yeah, and in general, this type of things are like a process. They're not like a one-time event. I mean, even if you go, so you mentioned Elon Musk, say you have to present something to Elon Musk. The thing is, even if you have something to present to this guy and he hates what you have to say and you're getting fired because of what you have to say, because you're not saying it right, which is kind of the worst outcome. The point is, if you're able to get in front of this guy, you're probably able to get to somebody else of the same caliber. And if that's your job, so you'll have to meet again. So at some point, you'll stop getting fired for bad presentation.
Yeah, you have a good way of looking at life, Nicola. You keep thinking that way, man. You're a glass half full, not glass half empty guy. I like that.
Yeah, it's more. I think it's a little bit more desperate. So that is more like it doesn't matter. That's more. So it's more like, yeah, the glass is half full, so who cares? No, no. Joke aside, what I'm trying to say is, people think they have this kind of one-shot opportunity, and and I don't think that's true. That's not what I've seen. Like, for instance, I remember I got in an incubator called Y Combinator, you interview, and for a lot of people, it's very, very stressful because you're supposed to, because it's a one in a time opportunity, it's 10 minutes and all that. So, yeah, you do feel the things. But first of all, I didn't think I would get in, so I really just talked to other people that were people who were interviewing. So the interview, I barely remember it. But two, it is kind of a make or break even, but the truth is, even if it would be a break, they would probably have, I would have got to another one or something like that. It doesn't really matter all that much. It's like people think like, for instance, for college. So when we moved here, so my wife is going to reapply to, she needs to study at, so she needs to do another internship as a resident, so she needs to do another medical residency because she's a doctor in France, but to actually work here. She needs to do that, so we're into the application process. And you can see that depending on how good you are, you can apply to certain medical hospitals for your residency, and you don't know where you're going to end up. It's a little bit unfair because you might end up in totally different places of the USA. But the point is, even if you really mess up one interview at some point, you'll end up at your second or third choice. It's kind of really, really hard to mess all of them up. And to actually be successful at this kind of things, you need to do the first one. Like, I'll actually give you a better example. First time I went to the US, I was to the company, they paid me my plane tickets to interview. So I was French, so I'm still French, but I was smoking. So the full day interview process, so I had to take smoking breaks during the interview, which I think is not a very good style in America now. But I didn't do that because in France we do it. So like, oh yeah, I need 5 minutes break to take to have a cigarette. They didn't like that. Two, I actually interviewed the second day after I landed with like 6 hours jet lag, and I was super stressed and tired and all that. So I, of course, did terrible at the interview. But it's because I didn't understand the process. But then after that, so I got not hired, and I would have been living in New York City and have had kind of a different life, I guess. But the point is, you have to fail to succeed. So I didn't know how that worked. I had no clue. I went to the first time. I failed, I think, spectacularly. But that's just because I didn't have the right. It wasn't anything terrible. It's just I didn't know you're not supposed to smoke and take breaks at a job interview. I didn't know it was going to last all day. I think it was going to last 1 hour because that's how it is in France. And and I didn't know I would be asked to fix to kind of try to solve some problems. So I was tired and I was just not prepared genuinely. So, but then. I kind of so I failed. I was like, okay, I failed. Okay, so well, yeah, I just got to plane tickets to visit New York for the first time in my life. And the worst case is, I mean, it's still cool. So I don't know. And they paid everything. So
Yeah, I like that, man. It's like, yeah, I get the job, but hey,
uh,
now I get to go see the Empire State Building. It works all right.
yeah, yeah. And then I moved back, and then I was like, okay, so how do I make it better? Okay, so first they probably I saw their looks when I told them I needed cigarette breaks, so I probably shouldn't do that again. And two, I probably should not be exhausted from the trip because they're asking me a lot of difficult questions, and if I'm tired, I'm not going to do good, especially if I'm on nicotine withdrawal. So.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being a guest, Nicola. How can people
I'm
get in touch
welcome.
with you?
So you can go on inboxbooster.com and you have my contact information. You can test your email and we can see and you can we can take it from there. And you can book a meeting with me directly.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you.